You can all hear me out there? All right. You ready to roll, Jesse? All right, folks. Welcome to Brix Cider. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Matt. I'm an owner here, along with my wife, Marie. And we're really excited about this series of events we're doing because we have this cool opportunity to, as voters, have a lot of really interesting choices for governor, and we want to make the right choice, and we want to think about it, and we want to hear from people, and we want to, more than just see them on TV, the talking points. We want to have a sit down conversation like a real person. And this is our second. We have all the remaining candidates are on the schedule as well. And we are also live streaming these, so if you're not able to see it in person, you can see it online at Brix Cider. Thank you to Jesse from Bullhound Productions for doing that.
Thank you, Jesse.
And yeah, I want to say one thing we're going to do, the way the event's going to go today, we're going to, Lieutenant Governor Sara Rodriguez and I are going to talk for a little while, just the two of us. I have several questions. It'll be just kind of informal conversation style, trying to just get to know who she is. And then we're going to do audience questions after that. So it'll be about a half hour us talking, and then we'll switch to audience questions for the remainder. What we'd like to do for the audience questions, there are some note cards on your tables, and there are some pens on your tables. If you could please write down your questions, and that way what we're going to do is Isabel over here is going to come around and pick up your questions, and then I will be pulling questions out. And that way, it was a couple things. That way we won't have someone who talks forever and ever and ever, like that happens sometimes. And then we also, people online will be able to hear because I'm the one actually saying it. So that was kind of the idea with that. And it's also, you all have an equal chance of getting your question asked because I will just pull it out like I'm pulling it out of a hat. Anyhow, thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Sara Rodriguez, for coming out tonight to Brix. It's your second time here, actually.
Yes, yeah. The last time we didn't have as many people, though.
Yeah.
We were just looking at the.
Yeah, we gave you a little tour and back. And so I wanted to start with something we actually have in common. We were both Peace Corps volunteers.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
So, we could just talk about that and reminisce for the entire time, but I think people wouldn't like that. But I do want you to indulge me with one story or something you took from that experience. Because this for me is a powerful couple of years, So something you took from that you still carry with you today.
I call them my dog years. Like Peace Corps were my dog years. Like it's 7 years in each year that you're in the Peace Corps, right? Like that you have more maturity, more life experiences, all of those different things. And it put me on my pathway to what I was going to do for my, you can't hear. Hold on. Can you hear me now? Is that better? No? Can I do that? There we go. Okay, I'm just gonna hold it. Okay. So was asking about Peace Corps volunteer, and I joke, I call them my dog years because it's like 7 years, and each year that you're there in the Peace Corps. I was in Samoa in the South Pacific, did HIV/AIDS and reproductive health education, and this was in the late 90s, where there was a lot of misinformation about HIV. And it put me on my pathway to what I was going to do. So right after that, I became a fellow and got my nursing degree and my public health degree after that. And it was a Peace Corps fellowship that allowed me to go and get those degrees. And so that's kind of what I've done my entire career is then healthcare, and now running for office and working on healthcare policy.
Yeah. So you're in a very interesting field of candidates right now. It's a very competitive race. It seems like you are getting some momentum in that you've raised some money, you're doing well on that side of things. You also just got the endorsement from Missy Hughes when she suspended her campaign. And you won the straw poll at the Democratic Convention. So you got some momentum. But what I want to ask is on the, so you have that, you definitely within the party, it seems like things are working, but like how do you then connect to the average voter? Like how do you translate that into connecting to people and winning the primary.
So, I've been to all 72 counties every year that I've been lieutenant governor and have created relationships in all of those counties. So I have endorsements in all 72 counties of leaders in their community. And that's one of the ways that I can connect all across the state is making sure that I'm continuing to talk to those folks, that I am continuing to hear what their issues are across the state. And it is a little different based on whether you're in rural Wisconsin, suburban Wisconsin, urban Wisconsin. All politics is local and all problems are local. And so you have to make sure you're listening to what people are talking to you about. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. And we're going to be putting flyers in mailboxes and commercials on TV to start introducing myself to people all across the state and talk about why I'm the best leader for Wisconsin.
And speaking of why you are the best leader for Wisconsin, so at first glance, when I remember the first time seeing all the candidates, it was in I think it was in the Cap Times or something, and it was sort of a quick blurb about everybody, and I was like, they all have the same platform. It's affordability, it's childcare, it's healthcare, and it's education. Yeah. Which are, I think those are all good things. But so how are you gonna, how are you different? How do you think you stand out, or what makes your platforms different than the other candidates? So,
I'm a nurse by background, and that really informs my policies. I've always been on the front lines, whether that is a Peace Corps volunteer. I was an epidemic intelligence service officer with the Centers for Disease Control, did national, international outbreak investigations, was an ER nurse doing night shift, and then stepped up to run for office in 2020 when there was COVID. We had the chaos of the Trump administration, and I was so frustrated with the misinformation and disinformation that was coming out of our leadership that I decided to run for assembly in a red district. And so I was able to flip that district from red to blue with a 4-term Republican incumbent, and I'm the only one in the field who has proven that they can win a difficult race against a Republican. And then I stepped up again when Governor Evers needed a partner. When Lieutenant Governor Barnes decided to run for Senate, and I won my primary statewide, and then we won together in the general at 3.5 percentage points, as he calls it, a landslide in the state of Wisconsin. I know. And I think that is what differentiates me from the other candidates is that, I've always been on the front lines doing what my community needs me to do. And 2, I've proven that I can win a difficult race against a Republican, and I've proven that I can win statewide. And I think those are things we need to think about for November and who's going to be able to get their agenda across the finish line. So we have such an enormous opportunity in this election to have majorities in the Assembly and the Senate. We got to flip 2 seats in the Senate, 5 in the Assembly. 4 of those were within a percentage point when Trump was on the ballot. So we have a little bit of a swing, blue swing, and we've got majorities that we haven't seen in almost 2 decades. But we've got to be ready. We've got to make a demonstrable difference in people's lives to show them what it looks like when Democrats govern, or they will flip that assembly right back to Republicans after those 2 years. So I strongly believe my experience outside of politics, being lieutenant governor, well equips me to run something as large as the state government. But I've also maintained my relationships in the Assembly and the Senate, and that's built on trust. And I have the most endorsements of sitting legislators today. And that's how I'm going to get that agenda across the finish line. I'm the most likely to win in November and the most likely to make a difference at the end of the day, to make sure we can really show them what it looks like when Democrats govern.
I think sort of a strength and a potential weakness for you is that you're sort of the next one in line from Governor Evers.
Yeah.
Like you're the natural successor. So in some ways, he's been fairly popular, and that's a great thing. But in other ways, people are kind of hungry for change or want to see something different. So I guess my question is, how would you be different than Governor Evers? Like, what would Sara Rodriguez governorship look like?
We're going to be different because we're very different people, and we're going to govern differently because of that. He has shown such incredible leadership for the last 8 years, particularly within a hostile legislature. So we need to build upon the success that he has given us. But right now, what I'm hearing from people is they want somebody who's going to fight. They want somebody who's going to stand up to Donald Trump, who's going to stand up to Republicans, and I am willing to do that. I am willing to use the bully pulpit of the governor's office to call it out when purple district Republicans are not doing what Wisconsinites want. So you want to know why your property taxes are so high? Because Representative Smith over there continues to vote not to fully fund your public schools. That's the kind of things that we want in our governorship. We want somebody who's going to stand up to the federal government and to fight for Wisconsinites.
Related to that, one spot where I know you were a little more aggressive than Governor Evers was on ICE and immigration.
Right.
I assume that in part comes from your family.
Correct.
Being married to a first-generation immigrant from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So to the extent you're comfortable talking about it, like how has this the experience with ICE and the administration that's driving it, how is it? How have you absorbed it, and how are you? How does that make your policy different, I guess?
So that was one thing that we did differ on. I had put out a proactive policy for federal agents in the state of Wisconsin that the agents needed to be unmasked, clearly identifiable, wearing body cameras, couldn't indiscriminately pick people up based on the color of their skin or the language that they speak, couldn't go into churches, schools, other sensitive spaces, and they needed a judicial warrant. And I did this before Alex Preddy was killed because I felt just so strongly that we needed to be proactive about it. And to be honest, this is why I got into politics in the first place. So in 2016, this is when we first met Donald Trump. My son was 8 years old, and he was in the kitchen and he was worried. And he says to me, he said, "What happens if Donald Trump wins? Will he make Daddy go back to Mexico? Will he make me go to Mexico? I know he doesn't like people who look like me." And it broke my heart that man's words had gotten into my child's head. And then when he won, I had to wake him up in November and tell him he was safe and tell him he belonged. But I told myself I was never going to feel that way again, that I had not done enough to make sure that man was not elected into office. And so that's when I went down to the Waukesha County Democratic Party and I said, put me to work. I will do anything. I will knock doors. I will make phone calls. I have to put this anger and frustration somewhere. And that put me on my path to running for office. But this second time, when he won, I told my husband to keep his passport card in his wallet. And I'm the lieutenant governor of the state of Wisconsin. I have one of the biggest microphones in the entire state. And when I tell that story on listening sessions across the state, oftentimes there is someone in the room that pulls their passport out of their suit pocket. One time it was a man of Indian descent. Another time it was a couple from Puerto Rico. So that's what we're dealing with in the state of Wisconsin, is people are so scared, citizens and immigrants, non-citizens alike. It's indiscriminate. And so that's why we have to be proactive in making sure we're protecting Wisconsinites all across the state.
You mentioned you were a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was right there. She was also a nurse.
You're always a nurse, aren't you? You never were a nurse. You're constantly a nurse. I know. Forever and ever, you're a nurse. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess what did you see in the healthcare system? Like you were a nurse and you moved through a bunch of different roles. It sounds like, I don't know the whole history there, but yeah, what did you see in the healthcare system and what did you learn? And I think it's kind of agreed upon by everyone that we don't have a great system. It's kind of a mess. Yeah. Coming from that background, what's your vision for fixing it, I guess? I don't have to tell anybody who's a clinician that the system is broken. I don't care anyone who has to touch the healthcare system. And I have to tell any of you that the system is broken. We have to make sure that we are doing everything we can in Wisconsin, that people have access to affordable healthcare.
So my plan for that is a public option on the exchange. It is based off of Colorado's model that has a 5% reduction in premiums every year with some cost transparency. Expansion of Medicaid. It's going to be harder for us to do that in the state based on the bill that Tom Tiffany and Trump put out there, the big ugly bill. I still think it's the right thing to do. And we need rural health stabilization funds because we know that the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare are coming. They haven't hit us yet. And they're going to hit rural spaces way harder than they are urban and suburban spaces. And if we do not have that Band-Aid until we can fix what Trump and Tiffany have broken, we are going to have more hospitals close in the state of Wisconsin, particularly in rural spaces. But I will tell you, I'll give you one example of how broken the system is. You know, my mom, she lives with me. She turns 81 at the end of this month. She's on Medicare. She's on a managed care plan. And she had to have a heart procedure where, and I know the clinician in the room is going to know what I'm talking about, but she had to have an ablation, which means they kind of stop the beating of the heart, right? The messages that it sends. And then she had to have a pacemaker put in. And that is going to now send those signals to the heart to beat. So she had the surgery. And then the insurance came back and approved the ablation, which means stopping her heart beats, and denied the pacemaker. And I was, do they know how hearts work, right? And she is like just beside herself about like, what, are they going to take it out? I'm like, no, mother, they're not going to take it out, but we'll fix it. But I'm a nurse. I have 2 master's degrees. I've worked in healthcare. And we still had to navigate that to be able to make sure that she wasn't stuck with a bill, that she wasn't, you know, that there weren't all these other things happening. And I have all the resources in the world to be able to do this. I can't imagine how hard it is for folks who are trying to navigate a system that is so convoluted and so complex. And we need to do better in the state. And we need to ask our federal representatives as well to fix this on the federal level. There's only so much we can do at the state level if they do not put in a better fix at the federal level.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably talk about that one forever.
I could talk your ear off about healthcare policy. I could. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on to a different one, though. I could follow up on that one, but I'm curious about your leadership style. Mm-hmm. You know, as a governor, you would be getting hit with a lot of things all the time. I'm sure you already get that as lieutenant governor. But yeah, you would be the one that people are looking at. And who knows what's going to happen in the next 4 years, right? Like we've had a crazy last few years. So yeah, what are you like in a crisis? Or what's your, when you're getting hit by a million things, how do you respond, that kind of thing?
So, I mean, when shit hits the fan, I think you want to send in a nurse, right? Like, we are cool, calm, and collected in all scenarios, particularly an ER nurse, right? And that is my leadership style, is to assess what's going on, make sure I have all the right information, surround myself with people who are smarter than me so that I can get the right advice. But I also have a very collaborative leadership style and an asset-based style. So we have several statewide officers in the state of Wisconsin. We've got the lieutenant governor, we've got the secretary of state, we've got the treasurer. And I can only be so many places. But here is what my agenda is. I'm going to ask them what they want to lead on. I'm going to say, hey, you know, here are a couple of things that we want to make sure we get across the finish line. We want to communicate to all parts of the state. What do you want to lead on? Because if we use every asset we have to communicate what our goals are, what our successes are, what we want to do moving forward, that's going to be an easier sell to the state of Wisconsin about why we're doing what we're doing and what the outcomes are for everyday Wisconsinites. Working with the leadership in the Assembly and the Senate, I've talked to them about that too. I want us all rowing in the same direction, right? We're not going to agree on everything. We're not. There's 2 separate and equal branches for a reason in our government, but that's okay. but I'm always going to treat people with respect, and I'm always going to make sure they understand where I'm coming from and what my goals are.
Right, I want to do a weird thing now.
Okay.
I want to ask you about AI.
Yes.
But I'm gonna ask a question from AI.
From AI. Ooh, interesting.
I'm gonna let AI.
Let's see if it lies about me.
Ask a question about AI. Where is that here? I actually already typed it in earlier in preparation here. All right. Hang on. So I gave the command.
Okay.
Please draft an AI-generated question about AI for Lieutenant Governor Sara Rodriguez. She's running for governor, and we want a compelling question that cuts to the heart of her views on the issue.
Interesting.
So here's what
You're
we
like
got.
asking the tech overlord to like tell on itself.
Yeah, you could like use tech to answer then if you want.
I don't have any tech. No, I don't have my phone with me. Okay.
We don't even have to have real conversations.
I know. We can just
anymore.
like, yeah.
Okay, here's the question that came up with. Artificial intelligence is already changing work, education, healthcare, government services, and even politics itself. As governor, would you approach AI mostly as an economic opportunity to accelerate, a risk to regulate, or a public interest tool that needs democratic guardrails? And more concretely, what should Wisconsin do now to make sure AI strengthens workers, students, and communities rather than simply concentrating power in the hands of a few companies?
That's a good AI question. That's good. Okay.
Feel free to take it however you want.
I know that's several pieces to the question. Okay. So do I see an opportunity in AI? I do. Particularly within healthcare. When you have somebody who has a complicated illness and they have multiple symptoms and multiple lab values and all of these different things, it is very difficult for one person as a physician or a nurse practitioner to be able to take all of that information and make sure that they're hitting all of the different possible diagnoses, right? So I see a value in that. I also see a value in using things like AI when you're checking scans, right? A human eye might not be able to see things as well as a computer can, particularly if there's changes. Like, you know, I'm turned 51 next year. Mammograms have been part of my existence. And they check changes from year to year to year to year. So I can see how AI could be helpful with that. But I still want a human at the end of the day looking at that information and making a decision, right? Using it as a tool, not as something that would replace a human being. I also think we need guardrails around AI and what you can use it for. So one of the things that they've been using AI for is something called dynamic pricing. It's basically you go to whatever store and you stand in front of a product and they look at you and they take all your data and they say, we think you're going to pay this much for this widget. And another person comes up and they say, they make a little bit more money. I think you're going to pay this much for this widget, right? Or they look really desperate, like they've got two crying kids next to them, right? They want to get out of the store with diapers like right away. So we're going to increase that price 20% because you know they're not going to another store, right? With two crying toddlers next to them. That, I think, is not what we should be using AI for, right? The price is the price. We shouldn't be changing prices based on what you think people should pay or how desperate they are for a particular item. And I want to make sure that we get the benefits of AI. It is our data that is going into these models, and we should have some benefits from that. I have a son. He's just finished his freshman year. He's going into accounting. That's one of those, like, not an AI-proof type of major, but he loves math and he loves money and I think he saved every nickel we've ever given him, right? So accounting is a good role for that young man. But how you use AI and making sure our universities are looking at those models and not putting students out there into the workforce where they're not going to have the tools to be able to be successful. We've got to look at it overall. And our administration had done an AI task force, brought in people from all over the country to talk about this very thing. What are the recommendations we need to make sure that we are future-proofing careers for tomorrow? so that we do not get left behind and our kids don't get left behind. So there's an entire recommendations on that we weren't necessarily able to get all of those within our budget because of the Republican-led legislature, but it is something that we can, again, take out, look at again, and for our next budget, be able to say, okay, what do we want to pull out of this to make sure that we are investing in our kids and we're investing in folks who may be, may have their jobs changed dramatically with AI. How do we make sure we upskill them, or we offer alternatives for a different type of job that they might also be really good at?
Okay. That's something I know is very controversial right now with AI, data centers.
Yes.
I know that's been a hot topic, and for good reason. And I think someone posted under, this is the event post for tonight, like moratorium or no. And
yeah,
I would like to hear your thoughts on that one.
So I haven't been for a moratorium, and let me tell you why. But I am for like absolute statewide regulations that are like the floor for regulations. And those regulations include making sure that there's community input into a data center. So when I go into communities, they tell me they didn't even know a data center was coming until the ink was dry on the contract. Like, that's unacceptable. You need to have community input of whether this is right for your community. And then they need to pay enhanced energy rates. So we know that if they're going to be using energy, it's going to have maintenance on the grid. It's going to have transmission lines. I don't want that to be on the backs of ratepayers. So enhanced energy rates, and if you want to build in Wisconsin, you got to invest in Wisconsin. So that means investing in renewables. This is a way that we can move closer to being carbon neutral by 2050, which is the goal. And then water usage, we have to know how much. And if they're taking it out of the system and putting it back in, it needs to be at the same temperature and quality as they took it out. And the fines have to be real with teeth. If it's a $10,000 fine for these billion-dollar companies, that is the cost of doing business. And so that's the floor. Communities could have stricter regulations if they wanted to, or say not in my backyard. And let me talk to you about why for the moratorium. It does not necessarily make sense to have it in every community. But if you look at Foxconn, what a debacle that was, right? It is not doing anything for the community. Yet they've already set aside that land. They've already set aside that site. They're putting a data center on that site. That makes sense. That's going to help the community. It's going to help the tax base. There's another one that's on a brownfield where you can't farm it, you can't build on it. So the data center is willing to come in, clean it up, and then put a data center on there, right? Again, with all of these restrictions. So maybe that makes sense, right? But it doesn't make sense for every community, and we have to make sure that we have these very strict regulations in place.
All right. So before we go to audience questions, if anyone else has an audience questions and wants to add it to the jar, feel free to write a little note card. I think Isabel's already picked up a bunch of them. But before we do that, if there's anything I should have asked you, it's like something you're really passionate about and really wanted to be able to share with everyone, what would that be? Or something you want us to remember when we get to the voting booth in August?
My mom was a teaching assistant for kids with special needs, and my dad fixed telephones for Wisconsin Bell. We didn't grow up with a lot, but service to community was non-negotiable in my family. And I've always taken that with me, whether that was as a Peace Corps volunteer, whether that's volunteering in my child's school. I volunteer with the Humane Society. I do barn chores every Sunday night, taking care of the horses and the goats. So if you're wondering if I can deal with buckets of shit, I can. But that's what I want to bring to the governor's seat, is that sense of service and that sense of just putting my head down and getting to work for Wisconsinites. And I think I've done that for most of my life and most of my career, and it's something that I would be honored to do as governor of this state.
I'm going to walk over and grab those questions.
This is dicey. You look like a squirrely bunch. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Maybe some interesting questions in there.
All right, we're going to fish around through here. Whoops. Am I still on? Yeah. Drop that thing for a sec. All right. Not sure who wrote it. We have, if you do not win the primary, will you work hard for the winner?
Yes.
Municipalities are being, I don't know if there's two separate questions.
I think they are two separate questions.
Separate questions.
Yeah. But yes, that like short answer, yes. Long answer, absolutely yes. We have to make sure that Tom Tiffany is not governor. I mean, that is, and every single one of us would be better than Tom Tiffany. Every single one of us.
I'll go with the yellow one. Do you plan to visit every county in Wisconsin during your campaign, or do you plan to get the vote out up north?
Oh, how do I get the vote out up north? Maybe. Okay. I've already done it.
Yeah. How do you plan to get the vote?
So
out
I've already
north?
gone to all 72 counties. Every year I've been lieutenant governor, and I've been to all 72 counties in this primary already, because that's how we win in November. We go everywhere, no matter how small, no matter how red. So we have allowed Republicans to define who we are in rural spaces for too long. I have an uncle. He lives in St. Croix Falls. He's a farmer, big Trump supporter, but loves me, right? Came to my inauguration, and he told me afterwards, he listened to Governor Evers speak, he listened to me speak, and he said, that wasn't what I was expecting. We don't hear those types of messages where I am. And that means we are not providing those messages. And we talked a little bit about his information ecosystem as well. We did, on Facebook and other things that he's listening to. I get that. But we have to at least, it doesn't mean we're going to have everybody agree with us, but reality is we have to make sure that we show them who Democrats are and what we're fighting for, and we don't allow Republicans to define us, because they're going to define us in ways that are unrecognizable to the vast majority of Democrats in this room and across the state.
All right. What makes you more electable than the other Democratic candidates?
Electable. I know. That's the electability question. Well, I live in Waukesha County, not exactly a bastion of liberalism, right? And I was able to flip a district with a 4-term Republican incumbent. So I have proven that I can win a difficult race. I've proven that I can win statewide. I think all of the candidates are similar at the end of the day with where we want to get to. We want to protect the most vulnerable among us. We want to fully fund our public schools. We want to protect our environment. We want to make sure that people are able to put food on the table, a roof over their heads, and take a vacation once a year, right? That's what we should be able to do as Wisconsinites. And we have to make sure we've got the right leader at the top of the ticket so that we can also elect down ballot those assembly members and those senators so that they can have those majorities to get done what we need to do. And I'm willing to work hard, and I know that I can do it, and I've proven it before.
Municipalities are having such a hard time managing their budgets, given the revenue sharing as it stands. What is your solution to get more money to local governments?
It's a really good question. Do you know that we are top 10 in the country for property taxes? Top 10. You want to know why? You guys probably know why. Referendums for schools, and the fact that we do not fund our municipalities and counties appropriately. So we need to completely overhaul the formula of how we fund our cities and municipalities. It's a technical word called revenue sharing. It's not really anything fancy. It's basically your tax dollars that go to the state, and then they create this formula and they give it back to the cities and municipalities based on a couple of different criteria. That criteria does not work anymore. And when I represented a purple district, I had several red county executives and red mayors who came to me and said, this formula does not work. We are going to have to cut services. We can't keep our library open, 7 days a week. We can't open the pools. We can't, we have to close the bathrooms in the park because nobody to clean them because we can't afford it. So this is a bipartisan issue all across the state. And I think it is something that we can get done so that people can have the services that they need in cities and municipalities that make Wisconsin as amazing as it is.
Right. What is your opinion regarding the Dems not voting to fund schools with the surplus funds?
So This was what this was, if you're unaware, was taking the surplus, was about $2 billion surplus, and it was going to go to some checks to individuals and families, direct checks, as well as put some money into the public schools. So if this would have passed in a bipartisan way, and Governor Evers would have been able to sign, I would have encouraged him to do that. But the reality is it didn't. And I can see it from both sides, from the administration side, which is, you got a bird in the hand. You want to make sure that you can give this money to the schools, right? And then what the Assembly and Senate were concerned about was sort of a looming deficit for this next budget cycle. So we know that there's a structural deficit coming up, mostly because of the Trump-Tiffany economy. And they're even more worried about that because some of these cuts that are coming haven't happened yet. And so if we have to pay more because more people are going to be on Medicaid, if we're going to have to pay more because more people are on unemployment insurance, if we're going to have to pay more because more are going to be on food assistance, they were worried that if that surplus went away, that we would not have the funds to be able to be flexible if the economy kind of went down into the tube. So I can see it from both directions, but at the end of the day, it didn't pass. And we got to move forward, and I want to make sure we have a permanent fix for our school system.
Next question. I hear Lieutenant Governor doesn't have much to do. What do you think about that?
So okay, official, like constitutional responsibilities, they are not wrong. But which means you get to make the role what you want. And so that's what I have done within this role. So I was the chair of the healthcare workforce task force, and be able to put recommendations out there of how to get more clinicians into the state, keep them here, and have a good pipeline for additional clinicians. I'm the chair of the Interagency Council on Homelessness, talking about housing all across the state and figuring out where we need to be able to coordinate across the different agencies so that people can get the services that they need. I was on the Women's Council, making sure that we're getting data to talk about the state of women in Wisconsin and what we might need to do to make sure that we can move people forward. I was on the Financial Literacy Council, talking about how we can make sure that people are saving enough for retirement, saving enough for their college education, for their children if they wanted to, those 529 plans, and making sure that financial literacy is taught in schools. That was part of the goals of the Financial Literacy Council. And then also working with other outside agencies to be able to try to find other resources and funding. So we put together with all of the different nursing schools, I brought in a potential funder for them where they would be able to help veterans become nurses. And they are only on the East Coast right now, and they want to be able to move into the Midwest. So that office of the convener is what I call it. As Lieutenant Governor, I can pull all of these different people together to say, hey, this is a resource that maybe we could attract into the state of Wisconsin. So I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of doing that and making sure that I was able to, if anybody called my office, be able to access resources where they needed it. Anytime I was out in the community, if somebody needed something, I was like, okay, I will figure this out for you, and we're going to get you the answer at the end of the day. So that's kind of what I did. It's what you make of it. And I was honored to be able to have the position and to be able to take that microphone and talk about the things that were important to Wisconsinites.
Kind of like when I was in Peace Corps, they just put me out in the village.
I know, they just put you out there and say, figure it out. I know.
And I did stuff.
You did stuff. You figured it out.
Okay, here's another question. It says, Sara, I am very pleased that you are addressing the high cost of health care. I'm 62 and want to retire in a year. My wife is only 50. How would your plan help us attain affordable health care?
Great question. So the public option on the exchange is going to be a more affordable option for individuals who want to be able to retire or not have employer-based insurance. It's something that you can buy into, right? So that is going to be a more affordable option across the state of Wisconsin and put downward pressure on prices. There's other things we can do in terms of pharmaceutical prices, working with the different there's like a middleman between the patient and the pharmacy. It's called a pharmacy benefit manager. And that increased costs within the system. And there's been really good legislation that kind of got squashed with the Republican-led legislature that would put some additional controls around those pharmacy benefit managers so that more of those cost savings could go on to consumers. And then I'm going to push really hard at the federal level, because again, the state can only do so much, right? And we need the federal government to do more. And so making sure we're pushing our federal representatives as well to make changes at the federal level.
Right. Question about
and I can't believe you're retiring
funding.
at 50. That is
No,
unfair.
it was the
He's gonna
person who
retire.
wrote it was going to retire.
Okay,
but
all right. I was
he
just
not
jealous.
yet
That's
retiring,
all.
as I understand. I don't know. What can be done to help local school districts and governments reduce or eliminate the need to go to referenda so often? You started to
We
touch
talked
on
about that, and
Yeah.
it really is the funding formula. It's how we fund our schools. It has not been updated in almost 30 years. And so it looks very categorically at like buckets of things, right? Like special ed is a bucket, these other buckets that you have, transportation is a bucket. It doesn't look holistically at the child. So other states have gone to a more holistic model for funding, which makes it really give the resources to the schools that they need based on the type of children who they're serving, based on poverty levels, based on English language learning, based on special ed needs. That is something that we can do. We also have to address the voucher system, right? Because we know that a lot of dollars are being pulled out of the public school system that's going to the voucher system. So we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We're going to have to build up our public schools as we're making modifications to the voucher system. And the reason why you cannot cut off the voucher system immediately is because there are in Milwaukee, 50% of kids are on a voucher. So if we cut that off tomorrow, it's not good for the child, it's not good for the community, and the Milwaukee public school system could not absorb them. So it's going to have to be a plan to boost our public schools with transparency, accountability, where it's not just about money, it's making sure that the kids are getting that world-class education that they deserve.
All right. When Democrats govern, what does that look like? Specifics, please. What are your 3 top initiatives?
It's like picking my favorite child. Gosh, you guys. 3 top initiatives. Well, here's the thing. This is one of the first things I'm going to do, even before we put our budget together, is pass labor reform, to making sure we can get back to union bargaining rights, that we reverse Act 10 in the state of Wisconsin. We know that when unions prosper, it raises wages for all, union and non-union alike. So that's one of the first pieces of legislation I'm going to do. But there are a couple of things that come up consistently that would be a priority for me. School funding, absolutely. That's got to be a priority. Childcare. This comes up consistently. I don't care where I am. Rural, urban, suburban, childcare. Federal government says for childcare to be affordable, it should be no more than 7% of your income. If anybody in here has a child in childcare, you're probably laughing right now. So with average costs in Wisconsin, just average, a family would have to be making $185,000 a year to afford one child in childcare, and I had 2 under the age of 5. So we're going to treat it like the infrastructure that it is. No more than 7% of your income in childcare. And we can do this. The Vermont model is a way that we can fund it, and it is also could include paid family leave. And if you think about that, paid family leave could be something that could address the childcare shortage, because what's broken in childcare is infant care. And so if you have a 2-parent household and you have paid family leave, that's 6 months. 3 months and 3 months that they could take before they needed to go into a childcare system. And so that would ease some pressure off of some of our childcare providers when it is so challenging to provide infant care, because the ratios need to be small and they can't raise their prices so much because families can't afford it. So that's the part that's broken, is that infant care.
we actually had a very related question. Why is universal childcare or supporting early education so important? But sort of a follow-up on what you're just saying, what do you plan to do to make this happen?
So we can have paid family leave and childcare in a segregated fund. And what that can look like is just how employers pay into unemployment insurance, they can pay into a childcare fund, right? And that is something that we can do, and we can implement that quite quickly. One of the things that we could do with the surplus is pre-fund, which is what we did. We actually proposed in our last budget, Governor and I, for paid family leave specifically, pre-fund it with the surplus and then gather those funds to continue to replenish it. But this is how we make a demonstrable difference in lives, in people right away. And we show them what it looks like when Democrats govern. Can you imagine if you were a family right now who was paying $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a month in childcare, and we subsidize that for you? What you could do with that money? You could come here, right? You could come here. You could order food. You could have those wonderful gluten-free cookies that I kind of want before I leave. You could go out. You could go on vacation. You can spend your money, and that helps our economy. And so this is the kind of thing that we can do for young people and young families. And if we're looking across, the Midwest, every other state is looking at this, paid family leave, making sure they're subsidizing childcare. So if you are a young couple thinking about starting a family, I want Wisconsin to be the place that you come to, that you want to come to, because we've got amazing schools. We're going to help you if you have a baby with paid family leave, and we're going to help you with childcare. And so we're going to have the support systems in place so that families can thrive.
All right, this one is rather long. I will try to summarize. Overall, they're concerned about investor-owned utilities making money on the basis of equity. So basically, the incentive to build expensive projects that does not incentivize building clean energy projects. So what is your opinion having different returns for clean energy versus fossil fuel burning investments?
Yeah, so one of the things that I have put out there as an issue is the Public Service Commission. So the Public Service Commission is the regulatory body that says, yes, build solar, yes, build wind, or a coal-powered plant or a new gas plant, right? And the way that it's structured is, with what this questioner is talking about, is it's a challenge when they're looking at sort of cost benefit to take into the cost, the environmental cost of not doing more green energy. And so they've asked to be able to have broader responsibility and powers to be able to look more broadly about how you would be able to invest in clean energy. This is also the one place that I can appoint people with the Public Service Commission. And to be able to appoint people who have ratepayers as their primary focus. And I think that's something that we can do as well. And I've also put out there that for the utility companies, they cannot use your money to lobby, right? They want to use the other money to lobby. They can use the segregated fund to lobby, but they cannot use what you are paying them to lobby within the state of Wisconsin. That has to come from something else. So I think we can put some things into place where we can put some controls around what's happening with ratepayer, with the rate hikes in Wisconsin. And I've said that I would do an executive order to freeze it so we can put these changes in place.
I have a related question. I saw an article, you probably saw it, that came out just recently about, I just want to give you a chance to speak to it.
Yeah.
The article where it was saying, I guess you took some campaign funding from We Energies.
Yeah, it was.
And the article was saying that you supported a bill that gave them a loophole.
Yeah.
I want you to have a chance to speak to that one.
Yeah. So I think trust is really important within your leadership. So I want to be clear that $500 donation when I was in the assembly had nothing to do with any vote that I would have taken. The legislation as it was described also had tax incentives for small businesses. And eventually that same type of legislation was eventually passed through Act 12 with Governor Evers later on, not in that one session, but the next one. It was eventually passed. I'm not taking corporate PAC money in this particular campaign, and I will always make decisions for the benefit of Wisconsinites, always. And I always have, and you should look at my record. I have.
Okay, so this next one is about the DNR. The DNR gets the majority of its revenue stream from permitting and licensing fees, which may lead to conflict of interest when it comes to enforcement. Sorry, I didn't factor in how hard it would be to read handwriting.
I know. You should see my handwriting. It's horrible. See? Yeah, there you go.
Do our efforts to protect Wisconsin's natural resources include helping the DNR be more independent and adequately funded?
Yes. I think the DNR needs more resources to make sure that they can enforce the laws that are already on the books, and they don't have the resources today. One of the other things that you may not be aware of in terms of the DNR as well is, the stickers that you buy for the state parks? Do you know that money doesn't necessarily go to the DNR for the state parks? So it's the state parks. We have almost $1 billion in deferred maintenance in the state parks right now. And they get appropriated the money for the state park system. But if they end up selling twice as many stickers as they were anticipated to sell, that money does not necessarily go to the state park system. So we have to fix that, right? So if you would ask a regular Wisconsinite, well, of course I want to buy the state parks just because I want to support the state parks. It doesn't necessarily go there. If they have more money than they're appropriated, it goes into the general fund. So that's something that we need to fix in the budgeting process and the appropriations process to make sure DNR gets the money that they need. The other thing that I've proposed is a civilian conservation corps. We used to have one in the state of Wisconsin, and we got rid of it. And this is a way where we can truly have an apprenticeship-like model for environmental, work within the state park system, and not necessarily not for kids, because I want them to be able to use a chainsaw, and you can't give a 16-year-old a chainsaw. But giving people the skills to be able to use that later and to be able to go into these types of jobs and paying them while they're doing it, I think it's going to be a win for our state park systems. It's going to be a win for individuals who want to get those skill sets. And it's a way that we can address some of that $1 billion of deferred maintenance in our state parks, which are gorgeous, by the way. It's my favorite thing to do.
All right, so we have 4 questions on data centers.
Okay.
We did talk a bit about them already.
Centers, yes.
But I'll still kind of give you the synopsis of these 4 to see if there's anything you want to add to what you said earlier. One question was, what measures can be put in place to limit their proliferation? Mm-hmm. What are your biggest concerns regarding hyperscale data centers? What is your policy on AI data centers in Wisconsin? And then this other one, Elder Royce favors hyper data center regulation rather than halting. She was here the other day. Mm-hmm. I guess we sort of talked about that.
The regulation piece of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. the moratorium or not.
Yeah.
I guess, since there were 4 questions about it,
I know.
Do you have any follow-up thoughts on it? Or?
I mean, my biggest concern is the environmental effects of it. I mean, it is. It's the environmental effects of the data center, but it's also, so that's my biggest concern. But my second biggest concern is how AI is used, right? It's not just about the data center itself, but what are we supporting for how AI is going to be used. And I had come out with some policies based on making sure that we can hold big tech accountable. And I already told you I have a 17 and a 19-year-old, right? So I have 2 teenagers. And we waited a really long time to give them a phone and an iPad, and I still wish we would have waited even longer to do that, because now we know how awful it is, social media and all these other things, and how awful it is for kids' mental health. But they also advertise to our kids. They take our kids' data and they follow them along with whatever website that they're going to, and they advertise to them and they try to sell them products. And, it harms them. And so we should also be able to sue big tech if it harms our kids. And you've seen some of that out there. And the onus is on the big tech company to put these controls in place, not the parents, right? My husband works in IT. He has put every type of restriction on our teenagers, our daughter, who's brilliant, by the way, our teenager's phone. She gets around them, all of them. We gave her a flip phone and she got on Instagram. Like, I didn't know that was possible, right? But this is what you're dealing. It's like whack-a-mole as parents. You're trying to be able to get it done. And the tech companies, it's not a fair fight. They have so much of that technology, and it is so addictive to our kids that it's not a fair fight, and we need to hold them accountable.
I think we have time for one more question.
All right.
What do you see as the most significant divide between rural, urban, and suburban? How are you responding to it? And how do you talk differently to each group?
It's interesting. The differences between rural, urban, and suburban. What I think the biggest divide is, and I don't think it's necessarily accurate, is resources. So if you ask, cities whether they get enough resources, they say, no, all the resources are going to, more suburbs or more rural spaces. But you ask rural folks where the resources are going, they're going to tell you it's Milwaukee and Madison, right? And so it creates this false dichotomy, and it creates this false narrative that we are fighting with each other for resources. And the reality is that nobody has the resources that they need to be able to do what they need to do appropriately in any of those spaces. And so this is why we need to fix the formula for how we fund cities and municipalities so it's fair, and continue to have that conversation and be transparent about it. I mean, I think that's the biggest divide that I feel like I've heard going all across the state.
Well, I want to thank you for giving us a solid hour. You didn't even have a chance to take a drink of water. We just kept you.
I thought it maybe
kept you talking the whole
cider.
time. Yeah, we figured you could have the cider after.
I can have cider after.
Yeah. But I don't know if you have any last closing remarks, anything you want to say.
I would just say that, I love this state. I love that we know when our neighbor hasn't picked up their mail and we check on them. I love it when I go into the hardware store and I am looking like I need something and somebody asks if they can help me and they don't work there, because that's Wisconsin, right? We are always looking out for each other as neighbors, as friends, and it's the Wisconsin that I love, and it's the Wisconsin I want to lead. And I would ask for your support this August 11th in the primary, and then again in November, so we can show them what it looks like when Democrats govern, what it looks like when we take care of everyday Wisconsinites. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for being engaged. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.